I'm Juliet Scott Croxford, and this is Women in Worth, a new podcast series from Worth Media.
Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights
For the record,
are human rights.
feminism, by definition, is the belief that men and women should have equal rights.
You told the world that time's up on violence. You told the world that time's up on silence.
Justice is not a concept we read about in a book. Justice is about how much ladies get paid.
They say it's a myth, but it's not a myth, it's math.
This is the best time to be a woman. I want young women to really understand that and believe it. It's not that there aren't barriers. Of course there are barriers.
Each season will tackle significant challenges women face in the workplace and society at large, in the hopes that doing so may chart a path forward to accelerate progress. This is season 1 of Women in Worth, Female Fortunes. Over the course of 6 episodes this season, we'll discuss financial planning, investment strategies, career development, opportunities to invest in women, and more. Each episode will focus on a major stage in our financial lives, from post-college to retirement and living well. Kathleen Entwistle joins us for episode 2 of this season to talk about motherhood and the workplace and how to invest in and plan for the modern family. Kathy is a senior vice president at UBS Financial and a private wealth advisor. She's also the founder of Entwistle Partners and the host of Smart Money Talk, a podcast by UBS. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Julia. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the facts. According to a recent UBS survey, 59% of women aged 20 to 34 defer major financial decisions to their significant others. Beyond the obvious point that this is 2019 and all women should have the resources and ability to manage their own wealth, why is this so problematic?
Well, it's very problematic because a lot of the decisions that we make have to do with finances and money. And if we're not involved in the financial decisions, then we're not involved in decisions about our futures, our goals, our values, our priorities. And that is very problematic.
And are you finding when you talk about this survey and these results to that demographic of women that you're getting what kind of response are you getting?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I actually was recently with a millennial who is quite pregnant, and we were talking about this survey and the statistics and how surprising they are. And a few days later, that same young woman called me and said, "Can I come in and see you with my husband? I do not want to be one of those women who doesn't understand their financial picture." So I thought that was great. I think when you address it, when you talk about it, when you share that statistic, it actually brings action. And that's what we're looking to do, action and then change.
What's interesting, though, is that despite that 59%, we're looking at a $33 trillion wealth transfer happening in the US in the coming years, and women are projected to manage the majority of that money. What surprised you over the course of your career about women and money?
Well, I guess, when I was first starting out, I was a finance major, and I learned a lot about money and finance, and I became very comfortable with it. And we always think everybody's just like us. So I thought everybody was comfortable with money. And then I realized as I was talking about different financial situations with friends, or we were talking about college educations, that the financial topic was not something they were comfortable with. And because they weren't comfortable, they never familiarized themselves with it. So it was like a gap. It was like a hole. It was something that needed to be addressed. So that was my first surprising fact, like, wow, this is not a topic that people are comfortable with. And then another surprising fact about it is that a lot of these decisions that women are making are the day-to-day decisions, right? So it's about, how much should I spend at the grocery store? Like, how much should I budget towards this? So like the budgeting concept or the applying like cost to certain goods or services, everybody understands that. But when it comes to the big picture, that's where we're not making the decisions. So how much are you going to spend on your child's education? Where are you going to live? What do you want your retirement to look like? There's so much that's tied into your life and your future and your security that if you don't know that and you're not taking part or participating in the conversation about your money and your financial picture, you're going to lose confidence and you're going to lose some ground, I think, too, in terms of helping to make decisions that are best for you.
And I'd like to talk a little bit about the psychology of that and this discomfort around having this conversation that is so necessary, yet so many women are deferring it. Why do you think that is? And how linked is it to kind of negative connotations around this sort of financial myth?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, too, because I think it's a lot to do with how we were raised. I think there's a lot of messages externally and internally that play a role in how we see ourselves and our money. So I would say there is common knowledge that women tend to wait until we're perfect at something, until we address it, where men will raise their hand to do something, a new career, a new position, when they feel they're like 75 or 80% qualified to do so. So from that standpoint, we have to learn that we don't need to wait until we're 100% on top of something to learn about it. We can start learning now and doing it a little bit at a time. Second is, I think, a lot of the messages that we received growing up. So if our parents fought about money, we just tense up when we hear it. Or if it was something that was taboo. Oh, we don't talk about money, or we don't tell other people how much we have, because it's a certain social aspect to that people are uncomfortable with. Really, what we really need to do is talk about not the dollars of how much you have, but what it means to you and what you can accomplish with that and what your goals are.
So in our last episode, we spoke with Seema Hingorani, the founder of Girls Who Invest, about getting more women into the financial industry pipeline. Today, I want to talk about the next stage.
Sure.
At this point in their lives, these young women are making significant strides in their careers. Many are looking around and deciding whether to have children. And for most, that comes with a cost that fathers don't often share. Some do, but often they don't. It's something you've personally experienced. Can you talk about the decision you made to temporarily leave the workforce to raise a family?
Sure, I'm happy to do so. My decision had more to do with my inability to multitask multiple things. When I had my first baby, I was planning on going back to work, and it just was more complicated for me to do so than I thought it would be. So it was really a decision about just keeping my life a little bit more in balance. And I stayed at home, and I really got involved in my community because I like to be busy. I like to challenge my brain and, think about different things. I ended up volunteering in the community, and a lot of times I would be on a board and they would need a treasurer. And because most of the women on the board with me did not like finance, nobody wanted to be the treasurer. So I would always raise my hand, and I'd do so. And they were so happy that I did it, and they thought I did such a great job. They'd say, "Why don't you be the president next year?" So that was like a trend, treasurer, president. And I would say, as I was home, I thought, there's a lot that we learn when we're home. There's a lot of skill sets that we gain by being a friend, a mother, a volunteer, a contributor to the community. And we don't really value that, or we don't really see what the value is, but there's a huge value there. I remember after being home for like 12 years, and I did volunteer quite a bit, and I did try to keep active and, educate myself on different things and so forth. And I do remember going for my first interview and being so nervous, like, who is going to want to hire me? 12 plus years out of the workforce, what do I have to offer? And I literally remember like my shoulders hunched over walking into that interview. And then during the interview process, throughout the questions they were asking me, each time they asked me a question, "Oh, you have your MBA in finance." "Oh, yes, I do." "Oh, you know a lot of people in your community." "Yes, I do." "Oh, you've been on all of these boards." And as each question, went, at the end of the conversation, they said, "We've never done this before, but like we're literally hiring you on the spot," which was amazing. It was an incredible feeling. And I walked out of there with my shoulders back, and I really reflected on that. And it was really the reflection about what we as individuals bring to the table through our lives, through our life experience, and how much we need to understand the value of that and the value of what we can bring to a corporation or a business.
That's amazing. And as you're telling that story, I can just see you visibly getting taller and taller as you tell that story. So after 12 years, what was it like getting back into your career? I read that you began teaching a class on finance to women at your local YWCA.
Actually, that's interesting. So I was teaching a class, a finance class, volunteering, and it was at the YWCA, and it was as a result of realizing that women didn't understand finance and knowing that there's got to be an easier way to help my friends and people in my community understand finance. So I started to teach these classes as a volunteer job, and what would happen is the women in the class would come up to me and say, I never really understood this before. I don't understand what my statements say. Can you explain them to me? My broker at the time, my advisor, speaks over my head. I don't understand what they're saying. They don't speak to me. And will you do this for me? And I was like, oh, no, I don't do this. I'm just here to educate you. And then I had my aha moment, like, wow, maybe this is something I could do. Something I'm passionate about, something I love to do, and they'll actually pay me for it. So it was like a big win. So that's how I went in and had my first interview and started that career. And it was interesting too, because as a mother with young children and trying to also be in this corporate world, and it was finance. So I was thinking the navy blue suits and the white crisp shirts, and how am I going to compete with these really hardworking, smart people? And the more I put my head down and worked, the more I realized that it's not really competing. It's just doing my best and making an example of what I could succeed in. I guess at the end of the day, I learned that all of that life experience makes a difference, and that we have to adjust to our personal situation and be authentic to ourselves. An example would be the firm I worked at wanted me to show up at 7:30 in the morning, but they didn't explain that to me until after I'd already arrived on my first day. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I dropped my kids off at school at 8:30, and I can be here at 8:35. But I cannot be here at 7:30. And I didn't understand that when you hired me. So if I have to be here early, I'm not going to be able to take the job. I'm so sorry. And then they adjusted. They're like, you know what? Come at 8:30. I came at 8:30 and I worked hard all day long and eventually succeeded in that hard work. And I think it's because they were willing to be flexible with me, with my situation. And that made an impact and a difference in my ability to be very good at what I was doing and succeed. So it's a give and a take.
And I don't know whether you've experienced this, but the women I've worked with that have also got children, I think there's a sort of different level of organisation that kicks in when you're and multitasking, which actually I find is almost kind of even more productive.
Absolutely. You absolutely have to get your act together. There's a lot that needs to get done. And you also have to rely on, different resources to help you and to sort of delegate out what can be done by others and hold what you can do. So I received some really terrific advice from one of my male colleagues when I was just a few years into the business. And he said to me, you need to go to the soccer field and see your kids play sports. Don't stay in the office 24/7. Get out there and live your life, and you can do your business while you're on the soccer field. Talk to one of your clients while you're watching your son play lacrosse or ice hockey. And I did that, and it was fun. So it takes some of the pressure or stress off of not being able to be present 24/7 for your kids, but to be present when it's important to them and when it's important to you. And I think finding that balance is really hard, but if you work hard at it, you can find that balance too.
We'll be right back. Let's take a moment to hear from Carrie Schwab-Pomerantz, President of Charles Schwab Foundation and Senior Vice President of Charles Schwab, official launch partner of the Women and Worth podcast.
We as parents talk differently to our sons than our daughters. When we talk to our sons, we talk about wealth building concepts. With our daughters, we talk about more of the household expenditure things like budgeting and savings, which are really important. But again, that holds us back.
Women in the West still on average make about 85 cents for every dollar a man makes. Now that's obviously a significant decline since the 1970s, thanks to progress made on issues like education and access to higher paying jobs. Studies show that much of the remaining 15 cents gap can be attributed to motherhood and the time women often take to care for children. Why are traditional gender norms surrounding motherhood so sticky, and how is it impacting our economies?
That's also a really great question. I do think that in terms of women taking time off to raise families or to have flex jobs, it can be challenging because we do get penalized for that. The particular type of career path that I went back into gave me more of an opportunity to earn equal to other male colleagues, but that's not the case in most positions. So I do think understanding that it's not about as much time in the actual workforce and that there's value to what men and women who are out of the workforce are doing, and that there's a value to that when they come back in. There's life experience, there's skill sets that they've developed while out of the workforce that can be compensated. And to pay people for the same position makes perfect sense. There shouldn't be an argument to that.
So let's move on now to investment strategies for women and young families. Firstly, what are the myths we believe about women and money?
Yeah, so one of the myths that we believe is that women are not good at managing money. And that is a very big myth because women actually have a very good sense about them and have a great ability to think long term, to not get emotional about money, to be methodical about investing their money. And I think if they just give themselves a chance, it's something that they will do very well. I've had many women who have come through my classes years ago at the YWCA and more recently through the library who did not have any understanding of their financial picture at all. And with just a little bit of time, a little bit of conversation to understand how to invest money, how to understand the process, a lot of them are really becoming more and more independent and feeling really confident about their ability. And I think that the confidence piece is a big piece.
And I think just speaking to people that they feel confident speaking to, because I think you want to have these conversations with people that you can relate to and that are like-minded and that have empathy around this subject. So how much of that sort of connects with who your clients are?
Absolutely. It's so important when you're speaking to somebody about a topic that they might not be completely comfortable with or confident in, that you speak with them in a way that is easy to understand. You're not using complicated terms or acronyms that are industry lingo, to understand really about what's important to them. I always say when I meet with a client for the first time, I don't say, how much money do you have? I say, what does money mean to you? And we really start talking about what their fears are, what their concerns are. We talk about, what was your biggest accomplishment so far? What would you like it to be? We talk about who's important to you. What do you do for your parents? What would you like to do for them? What do you do for your children? What would you like to do for them? By going through this series of questions and really understanding what's important to somebody, it helps them also see how their goals and what's important to them lines up with their money and their financial picture.
So what investment strategies would you recommend for women who are just starting out in building their families?
So the strategies that I would recommend would be dollar cost averaging into the market, which means you put a little bit in over time. I would say to, take a class or listen to podcasts or read books to get a little bit more information about the topic that you're interested in. I think that making sure that you're not taking on a lot of bad debt, don't run up credit cards. Some credit cards can be as high as 27, 28%. I would love if somebody could earn me 27 or 28% guaranteed consistently. So why are you paying somebody else to do that? And also, I do think it's really important to understand that there's different strategies of money that you should have. So for example, short-term money. You should have money for the next 3 to 5 years, like an emergency fund type of a concept. You should have some money in short-term cash-like investments that you can get to quickly if you need it. Sometimes we will recommend other ways of having access to like an emergency fund, but mostly some liquid type investments make the most sense. your investment money should not be the money that you're going to need in 6 months or 12 months, because we don't know in the short term what the markets will do. And what we look for is over the long term to see the money that you invest in the markets grow over a long period of time. So if you have a long time frame, you can invest your money in the equity market.
Kathy, as we end our conversation, I want to ask, 25 years from now, what conversation will we be having about women's progress?
I am an optimist. I am a true optimist. And I do believe that if we focus on this issue of women and money and the transfer of wealth that is going to women, that in 25 years, we will be looking back and saying, thank goodness we had that conversation, because we have women now who are empowered, who are confident, who are self-assured, who have investments in the market, and they understand their time frames, and they're successful in every meaning of the word, financially, personally, confidence, and so forth.
I love your optimism. I couldn't agree more. Finally, what does worth mean to you?
Worth to me, it's less about money and it's more about your personal impact that you make on the world around you, including the people around you. So for me, worth is being able to raise my children to be happy and balanced and to find something they're passionate about and do well in. It is about helping others, I should say, to understand their personal wealth and educate them on what they can do to improve the outcome of their financial picture. And it's really just about the person you are and the impact that you make on those around you.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was Kathleen Entwistle, Senior Vice President and Wealth Advisor at UBS. And that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. Please rate and review Women and Worth, or better yet, subscribe on your favourite listening app. Women and Worth is produced and edited by Karsha Brusalian, and a special thanks to Worth's Senior Vice President of Strategy and Growth, Alicia Hamilton. This episode is supported by our official launch partner, Charles Schwab. For more investing advice, visit www.schwab.com.